given the timeless nature of local government. It's not about getting it out this quarter, that quarter. It's about getting it out right and getting it out in a way that's going to add value. So yeah, that's something that's on our minds a lot, transparency.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. Today, I'm joined by Denise Collison, the Senior Vice President of Public Sector here at SHI. Denise and a few hundred of her closest friends in our public sector play a pivotal role in shaping strategies that determine how to best support SHI's federal, state, and local government customers, as well as those in K-12, higher education, and public health schools and organizations. Her leadership ensures that the public sector team stays focused on its mission to deliver impactful solutions and services. Denise, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ed. So happy to be here today.
Thank you. In this episode, we'll explore the evolving responsibilities of municipal CIOs, the challenges they face, and the innovative solutions they're implementing to meet and serve their communities in the digital age. A little later, we're going to hear from Dan Ault, Assistant Town Manager and Chief Innovation Officer for the town of Cary, North Carolina. But for now, let's hear a little bit about you and your role here at SHI.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit. I have 750 people on my team. All of those people are focused on helping public sector entities meet their digital transformation goals. So we aim to be a true partner in that journey, which, as we will talk about today, can be complicated, fraught with roadblocks and things that are unexpected, but our job is to support our clients through all of that and get to the end, which is really impactful for all of us because every one of us is a constituent. Every one of us is a receiver of services that we are helping to implement. So it's really meaningful work that we're doing here.
And the kind of the cocktail party conversation, I'm sure that, what you do in the public sector has, it differs slightly from some of the things that SHI delivers to public sector customers versus commercial organizations. I'm sure you get that question all the time. But what are some of the big differences in terms of what SHI does for public sector customers versus commercial? Or what are some of the added things that are necessary for us to do?
That's a great question. I think foundationally, the technology is the same, but how the customers need to use it, how they need to implement it, and how they actually have to go procure it and the things leading up to that procurement are wildly different. And so that's kind of where we focus. And we'll talk about it, I think, in a little bit, but things like funding sources, things like really specific proof of deliveries and proof of concepts to make sure these projects don't fail because there's not a dime to waste. Grants, all those types of things come into play in the public sector, contract vehicles that may or may not come into play outside of the public sector. So that's what really makes it different. And a lot of patience for our civil servants.
When they talk to musicians or songwriters, right, they say, what comes first, the music or the words? What comes first in public sector? I suspect it's one or the other, but what comes first? The availability of funding, the identification of a need, the identification of a technology, or yes, all of the above?
It's a little yes, all of the above, but I'm going to actually go in a different direction. I think there's tons of ideas. There's no shortage of ideas. It's right. Prioritization is actually the thing that has to come first, is figuring out where to start. What's the most important thing for that local municipality, that school, that hospital? And then from there, it's, okay, now parallel motions, I think. How are we going to fund this project? And also, what does this project need to look like? And how do we future-proof it? That actually is the biggest part of the conversation because they don't have, like I said, money to waste. So we can't get to the end of this solution, which can take a year, 4 years, 5 years, depending on what we're talking about, and then have to turn around and do it all again. So I think that prioritization is key, and that really has to come first. And we can help the customers with that as well. We do a lot of, art of the possible, here's where you are in all facets of your journey. Here's where we should start. This is why it makes sense. And then we go from there.
So in terms of prioritization being the key, What are let's take that as the first, obviously. I mean, it's prioritization, so it has to be first, right? But what are two or three other key challenges CIOs face when it comes to just evolving and technical transformation at the municipal level?
This is such a hard question. We're going to hear Dan talk about this a little too, I think, in a little while. But there's just so many. It's hard to narrow down to two or three. So I'm going to just quickly go through a few. There's a couple that are linked. First of all, a lot of local municipalities are very siloed organizations. So getting that collaboration, cross-department, cross-organization can be very challenging. In addition, within those organizations, there's competing priorities. And so you have to have extra skill at bringing people on board, organizational change, all of those types of conversations, even to just get an idea off the ground. So that's like, that to me is the first one and probably the biggest one for a lot of our local municipal CIOs. Then you have to look at skills gaps. There's a lot of legacy systems with a lot of people who know how to use those legacy systems really well. But then when it comes to modern technology, there's a lack of skill, and we are competing to hire people with those skills into local government alongside corporations who can pay a whole lot more. So that's definitely an issue as well. And then I think just when you look at the technology, cyber sticks out. I mean, cyber is a challenge for everybody right now. But as you transform, as you think about new ways to use your data, it is really challenging to keep people safe, to keep our data safe. And so that's an additional challenge. The last one I want to quickly mention is when you're talking about local government, you're talking about having to get constituent buy-in as well. And so getting out into the community and getting those people on board and excited and really bought in, and how those taxpayer dollars are going to be spent and how it's going to make their lives better is an additional challenge that's really unique to local government.
Got it. Okay. When we think about chief information officers, our minds often go to the private sector, big corporations, cutting-edge tech firms, and startups. But what about the CIOs who are quietly driving innovation within our own local governments? How often do we consider the role of CIO in making our cities smarter, safer, and more connected? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the vital role of the municipal CIO. Our guest, Dan Ault, serves as the Assistant Town Manager and Chief Innovation Officer for the town of Cary, North Carolina, where he's been pioneering digital transformation efforts that are setting new standards in city management. From improving citizen engagement to securing critical infrastructure, Dan's work exemplifies the intersection of technology and public service. For those of you watching this and noticed a different background, this conversation took place right before we completed our new studio. Hopefully those of you listening noticed no change at all, but this episode is packed with key insights. So let's jump in, and afterwards, Denise and I will share our thoughts on managing digital transformation within local government. Dan, welcome to the Innovation Heroes podcast.
Thank you so much, Ed.
So I was intrigued to learn that you always knew you wanted to be a city manager from the time you were just a kid. Out of all the things a little kid dreams of becoming, what is it about city management that appealed to you so much?
Well, I think it started, Ed, as initially just an interest in government and maybe geography to start. And as I grew a little bit older and got to about age 7, and I think I started Little League or whatever it was, minor league, I was checking out the stats, and in the little newspaper, I grew up in a small town called Howard, Wisconsin. We had just hired our first village administrator, which is the equivalent of a city manager. And it spoke to me even that young. I asked my parents straight away, I'm like, who is this? This is really what I want to do in government. Like, he seems to be a part of everything. So right then and there, it was kind of just always in the back of my mind as something that I aspired for quietly for most of my childhood. But just, yeah, from that point, I knew.
I think you went to school for poli-sci, not necessarily for technology. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's accurate. So I went to school, and at first it was just kind of general political science, worked somewhere in government, and then with the help of some advisors, they brought me back to my roots and encouraged me to pursue public administration specifically, and city management.
So over the last decade, how has the role of the CIO in municipal government evolved, especially in terms of balancing traditional IT responsibilities with the push for innovation? So you've got your everyday IT, but then you've got to innovate.
especially where you're the chief innovation officer. But we'll get back to that. But how is it evolving over the last decade?
It's been exponential. I think about a decade ago, there was a lot of talk about whether it's the chief marketing officer or the chief information officer that's going to play the bigger role. Certainly both have evolved into large roles. In cities, it's more along the lines of chief information officers and chief technology officers who have been in it since, the 90s is really where it came into play. But within municipalities particularly, we've kind of always been the laggards a little bit in terms of new technologies, and that's been, for decades. And so in the last decade, what's really changed is it's starting to spread. What used to be kind of just its own silo is now very much diffused because of what's happened in the consumer technology world and what people expect in their everyday lives. So the pressures to keep legacy systems going because there maybe hasn't been innovation in every space that's necessary to develop the infrastructure that is going to be necessary to operate a high-tech society in the information age isn't quite there. So you have to, on one hand, continue to maintain stuff or to provide services every day, and at the same time try to find ways where you safely can introduce new technologies and do so where you have, in some cases, people that are very advanced in technological expertise, in other areas where they maybe are lacking and don't have the desire to advance. So it's really a paradigm that almost on a daily, weekly basis, IT departments are facing just a myriad of different types of challenges in cities.
So in terms of exactly where Cary, North Carolina is located, it feels like your constituents are a group that can be very IT savvy in comparison to some other places. I mean, just for background, we're talking really that research triangle of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary. There's 3 research universities there with University of North Carolina, NC State, Duke. That whole research triangle is really a 1950s concept that never ran out of gas. It's if anything, it's probably going even faster. So like when you think about the people that you serve, like, is it actually in your mind like, wow, we have to innovate because these guys are literally at the cutting edge of, pretty much everything.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely true. I couldn't have said it any better. The research triangle region that we're in, the universities, the research firms, the biosciences, the SAS, so on and so forth, the places that really kind of put this place on a map, I think they're bringing so many timeless elements, education, research, and with that, our citizenry is very advanced in these topics. They have high expectations. We have a unique phenomena currently. It may change over time, but demographically, a lot of folks, came from somewhere else, whether they were immigrants or from within the United States. But it's very common in Cary that people came from somewhere else, and they did so intentionally because they could, because they had an opportunity. So that very much lends itself to a citizenry that has high and realistic expectations. So those are, in today's world, a very unique combination. I refer to it sometimes as an endangered ecosystem of democracy with our citizenry. So to me, I saw it as a way that could help push me to be the best version of myself as I could be, and also as an opportunity to continue to learn and continue to push change. Because if it can be done here, I feel like it has an opportunity to be done elsewhere as well.
And you relocated to Cary to take this position, if I'm not mistaken, right? Did that make it that much more exciting? Like, say, okay, like, I'm not the only person that's transitioned here, and number one, and number two, I'm going to get the opportunity to innovate here.
Absolutely. That was a leading factor for me. I previously was fortunate enough to work and go to graduate school in the state of Illinois. I'm from Wisconsin originally, and also worked there in a county. So slowly been making my way south, but the region's appeal with the Research Triangle was definitely a leading factor for me. It stood out, and I'm like, this is a unique opportunity on top of a unique opportunity on top of a unique opportunity. And that's something that doesn't just come along any day. So I was just fortunate to have that, and to, it's something I think about a lot. Other factors are the state of North Carolina. It's a beautiful state. I love the latitudes we're at. I love the landscape of the coast to the mountains to the Piedmont. beautiful pine trees. So there's a lot of things that are, going in this neck of the woods. So all those things together really made it, an easy decision in that sense. But given my profession, the citizenry and the research was a really strong factor.
Yeah, I'm in central New Jersey right now, and I can tell you that I know at least 10 or 12 different people who are relocated to North Carolina. And believe me, I get the texts in the middle of January, with the pictures outside. It's like, you guys don't have to rub it in, believe me. But so from a digital transformation perspective, we hear a lot of buzz about smart cities. Can you share some specific examples of digital initiatives that have been successfully implemented in Cary?
Sure.
What kind of initiatives have helped improve municipal services?
Yeah. So, we have, a number of initiatives. In fact, I was on a call earlier today. The different number of projects we have, it's in the hundreds and the thousands. So there's a variety of them. We've done a lot of work early in my time with the town. IT and several other departments partnered on sensors for stormwater. I believe that the success of those is only going to continue to appreciate with time. The smart cities concept for me, just personally, is more of a marketing kind of thing. I think cities have been smart forever. It's just the vehicle. The river civilizations I often go to, those were the original smart cities. So to me, I think it's less about trying to capture the buzz of something versus just really being intentional about the movements that a municipality makes. Thinking of it that way is a little bit different. So the biggest one, and I'm sure I'll talk about later too, is our 3-in-1 initiative, which is more than just a contact center. It's the vehicle to, with intent and with thoughtfulness, incorporate things that people often call smart cities into a cohesive infrastructure. And the way that you do that is by looking at the different entry points, 911 and 311. So there's a variety there of things, again, related to sensors in particular that we've had success with. There's other things that we're doing, whether it's with drones and a variety of things that are also things that could fall under the smart cities. Umbrella, cameras, certainly other things they're starting to look at, but haven't done too much yet. And then the old one that was there way before, Cary was advanced in so many areas. Our traffic center was way ahead of its time. Again, it predates the idea of a smart city as a marketing kind of thing, but the intelligent traffic center is one of the things I'm most proud of, and we're continuing to now modernize that and also become an even bigger regional partner managing the infrastructure for surrounding municipalities. And we also do that in utilities as well. So those are some of the ones that they aren't brand new, but we're continuing to improve upon what was way ahead of its time. Kind of a quote smart cities initiative. So those are some of the most successful ones that come to mind.
How important is it? We're just cities. We're really just talking about imaginary lines drawn in the earth. But you got Raleigh, Durham, you got Chapel Hill, you got Cary. Like they're all kind of exist, right around one another. And I'm sure there's some municipalities that smaller municipalities that are missing there, and you're all within the state of North Carolina. And there's different jurisdictions. How important is it? You could say from a utopian point of view, well, I'm just going to worry about what's within my control.
Sure.
But you have to be there must be partnership with the surrounding areas and at least the state, right? How important is that?
Well, I think it's always been important, and it continues to be important because you're right. The political boundaries matter, and certainly I never forget, who's signing my paycheck. There's no doubt about that. So there's a very much a bias that's up front there, without a doubt, that I'm pulling for Cary. However, it's just my opinion and also my experiences. There's less regional competition. There's some still. It's more national and international now that we're competing. So our success is their success. We all can bring something a little different, where we do compete on the edges, no question. And I think that's healthy because it makes us all better, but not to the point where it's counterproductive is always kind of the idea. In the state of North Carolina, helps make that happen more often than not, maybe more so than in other states. I don't know for sure, but that's just my opinion. And so, in Cary, we are fortunate to be in the middle of that triangle geographically. So we are immediately adjacent to Raleigh and Durham. And we're in 3 counties. Durham County, Wake County is our primary one, and Chatham County as well, to our west. So it's a little bit of urban, suburban, and rural also kind of adjacent to us. But being right in the middle of the research triangle, we have an ability to partner with many municipalities in the region. And we also are positioned well as people move through the region, and not to mention the region, but the state. And we're also the midway point of the East Coast. So we're kind of, I like to joke that we're the center of the center of the center. And from that position, geographically, there's, opportunities if we so choose.
What you're saying about the competition on the national and the international level, there are people out there that are pitching businesses to come to North Carolina. Like, have you ever stopped and heard somebody pitching North Carolina and be like, I worked on that project, and that's going to be attractive to somebody possibly considering moving a business here?
Yeah, certainly in my time here, there's been some big pushes that we've been part of, and then some smaller ones. And frankly, it's kind of a backwards world. There's been some that, in today's, currently today, we are known as a desirable place. So in some cases, places come without us even trying, which is a little bit unusual to my previous experiences. But it helps you kind of understand what your competitive advantages are. It helps you understand where you maybe need to grow or where you have some blind spots that you need to improve as a region. We're going very much from being like a big little city region to now, kind of a little big city region. So it's kind of a transition in terms of metropolitan areas in that sense. So those processes are something, that is very rewarding to be able to compete internationally and nationally, and then also to be successful in so many areas as the region has been. We always wanted in Cary, but sometimes, frankly, we know in the region, it's better somewhere else, like an RTP or something like that. So,
yeah, I would imagine just having, public sector IT, as you cited, as a competitive advantage, that has got to be, extremely satisfying. Public sector IT departments face unique challenges. There's budget constraints, there's public scrutiny. How do you prioritize projects and manage these challenges while still driving innovation?
Well, so I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the ways is if you're serious about innovation, which is something for municipalities to consider, because it's a relatively new concept to think of innovation so positively, especially in government. Traditionally, it would have been seen as a threat. And it's important to remember those pieces. I believe that if you're going to systematically and systemically ingrain innovation, it's best done both ingrained in the operations and segmented. So you have to have some, at least small group, that's kind of dedicated every day to systematically ingraining innovation through a standardized, a mechanized process. Otherwise, the weight and the gravity of our work each day will create an environment that makes innovation within local government very, very difficult. And when that happens, then it kind of permeates into the community, and we're supposed to be more or less a catalyst for innovation. There's other models that could be used. In some cases, you could say we're going to put all our eggs in helping the community and businesses innovate. That's a different model. In terms of then keeping the lights on, I think there's some groups of people, not saying that they're excluded from the process, but that you have to segment the work. Whereas this is more dance floor, day to day, we got to keep this up and running, or this legacy tech we're stuck with for a few years, so somebody's got to be working on that. It can't be focusing on the innovation piece, at least not every day. That's what they do on Friday afternoon, or that's what they do, et cetera, at a different point. Or that's what they're going to do in a few years. Or there's folks that maybe perhaps they like tinkering. So asking them to come up with transformation is never going to be something that's right in their wheelhouse. So I believe that it's best done by segmenting, but also ingraining it operationally so that it can be tested. And by operationally, I mean in the departments, out in the field, out where folks are, as part of their work, being innovative, whether it's police officers, firefighters, or public works employees fixing infrastructure. I think it has to be close to the work is the most important thing, is that it's close to the work.
And there's a million curveballs that hit you, because you were in position, when you were just mentioning like first responders just now, and you were in position in 2020 and 2021 when there was the pandemic, and government didn't have the option. Everybody was turning to government and said, businesses said, okay, we literally flipped a switch and had 6,000 employees, work from home from Friday to Monday, and you didn't have that option. So that innovation has to happen in spite of like these curveballs that are coming at you. Like, what was it like during that period? In terms of how quickly policy was changing, just how you could actually support your constituents.
Well, yeah, I mean, so in some ways it's very difficult, and it was for us because it's one of the few kind of emergencies that we didn't have institutional knowledge on, pandemic. Certainly at one time in the profession, but it's many, many years ago. That's that's unusual in local government. Usually there's somebody who's been around that's seen some sort of freak event, so there's internal expertise. We didn't have that. So in some ways that makes it very difficult. Other ways it makes it easy in the sense that a lot of other stuff kind of melts away. So you mentioned prioritization earlier. To me, it's all about ripeness. There's a million things you can put in holding environments, which is the challenge. But really it's about its psychological readiness and urgency among the factions that determines what's a priority and what's urgent. And so during the pandemic, it was a little bit wild, especially at first, but really what it did is it broke through a lot of the old conventions of how we thought we had to work or could work. It also, folks that had been working a certain way, it was, even those folks had to adjust a little bit to now their colleagues working a different way. And resisting, I think in our case, of trying to make sweeping changes or permanent changes until we had a chance to kind of reflect on really what does it mean for our long-term goals and vision, and most importantly, to not distract from the current mission, which is serving the citizens. We actually launched our 3-in-1 Center right before the pandemic hit. I mean, we launched it, and then we had the first case in North Carolina, unfortunately, right in Cary. And that was not something that obviously is ideal, but you had to flip it on its head that, a threat and an opportunity are the same exact thing. It's just how you look at it. And so I also looked at it as we have a very unique opportunity that we can say that we're the 3-in-1 that launched during the pandemic. And things like remote and other challenges are never going to be a challenge for our 3-in-1 because of the nature in which we were launched. So that's one example from me specifically. But it was challenging because the teams had to really look hard at learning as best they could how to develop holding environments, which means you're working on something, but it's not ripe. And you may have to wait some time before it's ripe to go forward.
In terms of like citizen engagement and transparency, you talked about, launching the 311 number during the pandemic, but technology plays a crucial role in improving communication between cities and their residents. In addition to that, has there been anything else that you've implemented in Cary to enhance citizen engagement and promote transparency?
Yeah, there's a variety of things. We have an interactive development map. And everything that we're doing is obviously it's evolutionary. 311 is never done. We can continue to add on releases. So a mobile app will be coming out shortly and that sort of thing. In terms of transparency, to me, I think that's something that we will continue to build, and it's so important because it's not just about putting things out there for the public. It's actually about being able to demonstrate how decisions get made and what are the inputs and the activities and the processes that are associated with decisions and value choices. We also are being thoughtful with how we release things because when we do that, we are absolutely, like our mobile app, bringing citizens fully into our world. And that's an adjustment for employees. It's an adjustment to the way that we work in a sense now that there's a little bit more of an instant communication possibility between us. So doing that thoughtfully, I think, is a very, very important thing, given the timeless nature of local government. It's not about getting it out this quarter, that quarter. It's about getting it out right and getting it out in a way that's going to add value. So yeah, that's something that's on our minds a lot, transparency.
Well, the one thing we ask almost everyone who comes on this show is cybersecurity and how, like what keeps you up at night. So with the increase in cyber attacks and with, AI's role in both, fighting against and, making cyber attacks even more sophisticated, what steps have you guys taken to secure Cary's, municipal systems against these threats?
Yeah, so I'm proud of our security team. Like everyone, there's room to grow. I wish we had, I say more of it, but by more of it, I don't mean like more restrictive. I mean, it was in the conscious of more people, including myself. But, we rely on expertise. We have a lot in the region and on our staff. hiring good people is I think the number one thing you can do now. It's all about people more so than technology. The technology comes second with the people, because there's a variety of choices, and so you got to put trust into the people. What keeps me up at night, in a sense, is kind of what I described earlier, that it's not something that we're all engaged in. It's not as much of a team sport. There's a select small number, if you look at it in the scheme of the world, that are engaged in it, that have an ability to access information, to move information, and the masses really have no idea. And so as technology evolves and that kind of gets accepted, or is accepted or isn't evolved, if security isn't seen as something that has always been important to cities, that comes in many, many forms, that's a real danger, I believe, because it's going to impact citizens at a rate that is often going to be greater than they can absorb, and they're going to go to their local government for help. And that may not come in the form of, hey, I have a cyber issue. It comes in some other form that, maybe, they don't, want to share with us. So to me, it's ingraining local government enough in the data infrastructure to be able to create platforms that provide some sense of security, certainty, and is also realistic. The mail's been being opened for many years.
Right.
Some, what I mean? Like those sorts of things. That's surveillance in a sense. Phones have been tapped for a very, very long time. And that did not have the same psychological impact, because although it does have a psychological impact, it doesn't have the same because the uncertainties are less. In the information age, these are exponential. So as much as possible, this has to be a team sport. And when that happens, then I'm confident a lot of the innovation that's happening in the cyber realm actually could be channeled for good.
I think a big part of it is that transparency you were talking about earlier as well, because I think especially at the municipal level, when it comes to security, even physical security, let alone cybersecurity, I think the sense of the citizenry is like, hey, somebody's is watching out for this. Somebody's thinking about it, right? So I think that transparency, at the you have those competencies that you demonstrate all the time. If there is an attack of some kind, where you have to, even if nothing's compromised, you just have to take things offline. Have the constituents have confidence in what you've been doing all along has got to be huge, because as you mitigate your way through whatever cybersecurity issue you might face.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's important to keep it local, because for us to evolve and then learn and grow, we're all networked now, so we can share lessons, but getting away from a monoculture where we all are using the same few vendors makes it a very easy attack surface, versus if there were ways to diversify the kind of culture of our infrastructure. And also, I think the citizens help with that. The citizens, use a variety of different technology platforms. There's a variety of different ones around the world. And finding ways as much as possible to safely plug into each other, I think provides the most resilience for a community. And there's also some degree of local, I believe, governance or control around this issue. Some can say they want a more secure area. Some can say they're okay with a little less security in a sense. We're in a space where we live in the world of public information. Almost everything is available to the public anyway. So there are some domains where it's not the crown jewels. It really isn't. And then others, it certainly is. So I think the role expands because of what I mentioned, that citizens being more and more in over their heads as they get inundated with changes in society and uncertainties. Local government, as it has been forever, is the level that they can reach and touch regardless of the form of government.
And I love, like, when you said reach and touch, you said that with the 311 line, like, you actually expect people to research and get back to them with an answer, which I think is fantastic. And I have not heard that stated so clearly before, so that's kudos to you guys on that.
Thank you.
Looking ahead, so you were saying when we first started talking that there's your everyday tasks, and then there's there's always going to be a small group, at least a small group, looking ahead towards where the next innovation's coming from. What emerging technologies or trends do you believe will shape the future of municipal IT? What's your vision for the technological future of Cary, and how do you achieve that vision?
Yeah, that's a huge question. So
It's
I'm going to do my
massive,
best to keep myself kind of channeled. And I'm going to, straddle between kind of the aspirational future that I don't have a timetable on. It's just where I see it goes and what the foundation working on goes. And then what I see more in the short term in Cary. So longer term, I see it as IT evolves into something that is, it's supporting the organization, but it's supporting the community and what the community treasures, which going forward will more and more be its data. And I believe operationally what you'll see is other departments, fire, public works, and the like, building inspectors, police officers, will be more and more technology people, and will be engaged in innovation in the field. I believe that there'll be a blend of what happens within a geography in figuring out how to align those values, and meet the needs of the community. But also then, now that we're tapped in, globally, certainly nationally and regionally, there's opportunities to extend that value or to maximize the value with each area kind of being able to leverage what they do best. I believe that local government is so unique in that area because around the world, we're 80 to 90% the same. I mean, fire in pick your favorite country, fire departments really are the same.
Yeah.
Standardization has done a great job. Police departments, same thing. It's really at local government, not that different. The water plants, producing safe drinking water, treating sewage, is really the same around the world. There's maybe different standards, but the idea is the same.
Right.
Building permits, there's international codes around that, so it's really the same. Something similar is going to happen in the technology domain, and I believe it's best grounded locally. It doesn't have to be just grounded there. That's just one area that it is grounded that allows people to kind of, reimagine the collective, which fundamentally is what innovation is about. It's about the collective coming together. So I see that there's going to be endless opportunities for fire departments and for city managers' offices, et cetera, to help orchestrate these opportunities for local community engagement that has more global impact.
Yeah, and based on what you said, I would not be surprised if that innovation continues to be driven by Cary and the North Carolina Research Triangle there. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. For listeners interested in hearing more, or would like to reach out to you directly, which I suspect that there's going to be some city managers who might. What's the best place to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn is a great way to find me. Otherwise, feel free to shoot me an email at the town of Cary, dan.ault@carync.gov is another great way.
Innovation Heroes is proudly produced by SHI, a leading global IT solutions provider dedicated to making life simpler for business and IT professionals. For over 30 years, we've bridged the gap between digital strategy and execution, delivering cutting-edge technology and services to thousands of customers worldwide. Whether you're navigating the cloud, strengthening cybersecurity, or transforming your workplace, SHI is here to help. To learn more, visit shi.com/solvewhat'snext. That's shi.com/solvewhat'snext to embrace the future with stress-free, scalable solutions that you and your people will love. Okay, Denise, we're back, and I just want to dig into a couple of the things that that Dan really touched on. And I think one of them is really the strategies for navigating the unique challenges of public sector procurement. We talked about it kind of at the top of the show, but really managing tight budgets and regulatory requirements and the bidding process. What do you see in terms of how do people who are really good at this type of thing, like what characteristics do they have, or what best practices have you seen out there supporting so many public sector customers?
Wow. This is such a good question, and I have been doing this for a long time, almost 30 years, so I have seen a lot, and it's evolving. One thing I just want to say about regulatory requirements is I think even more so than funding, that one can be the most challenging because they are constantly changing, and the customers don't necessarily have any control over that. They just get, hey, here's a new requirement, now go and put this into place, and whatever cost that might accrue, figure out how to deal with it. And so they're constantly having to shift monies around to meet these regulatory requirements, something that's extraordinarily, I think, overlooked when you think about the challenging role that is a CIO in a public entity. So something really worth noting. How SHI might help, or how a partner might help, is staying abreast of those regulatory requirements, making sure that we really understand what that means, how it will impact the customer, so that we can come to that table fully prepared for that discussion and with really good opportunity for solutioning and things like that, instead of just trying to learn it from the customer when we're sitting at the table. So that's a really important part of the partnership when you're dealing with public entities. So I'll just say that I think for procurement itself, I mean, most local entities have to procure either by public RFP or by cooperative contracts. So public RFPs can be extraordinarily time consuming and expensive. And often when they get to the end of those, there is a dispute, or, some type of appeal that one of the responders will go through that causes even more delay. And so I think just being a really good responder to RFPs, putting your best foot forward, making sure you're addressing the questions, really knowing what that customer is trying to accomplish going into that cycle so you can be the best responder, really helps these public entities. And that's what we're here to try to do, is support them in their journey. And so that can be a very quirky process for them too, which is why I think a lot of public entities steer towards cooperative contracting. So just having those avenues for them to procure what they need when they need it in the easiest, most cost-effective way is really critical for these customers. The last piece of that is funding, and that is probably the most important part, because finding the money or helping the customers access grants and funding that is available to them is really key in helping them get these projects off the ground. And so SHI, for example, has a whole team, a whole grants and funding team that helps customers get reports that show them all of the complete opportunities that are available from the federal government, state government, private funding sources, so that they can then consider and go out and write grants, or go and actually, try to get those funding sources. And we help them through that journey. And so that's another piece that differentiates public sector, and Dan talked about a lot of that.
And you mentioned the amount of time that you've been working in the public sector, 30 years, and in terms of cybersecurity, like are there unique things that public sector, IT managers and procurement leaders, need to consider from a cyber perspective, or how has it evolved over the time that you've been supporting it?
I think there's always uniqueness to public sector, but again, foundationally, what they're trying to do is the same. They're trying to protect our data. They're trying to protect our security, their constituents, you and I. And so I just think there's this elevated set, and with taxpayer money, and I think there's this elevated sense of responsibility around that. They can't get it wrong, and if they do, someone is going to be removed from office. Somebody is going to be not voted in again next year. And so that might be the biggest differentiator. But again, foundationally, they're trying to protect our lives, our data. So it is different, but it's also very much the same. It's just such the big hot button topic. I will just say this. I do think that public entities in many situations are getting much more in terms of sophisticated attacks, the number of attacks that they get, because they hold so much personal information about each of us in their databases. So the volume is massive of these attacks. I'm just so in awe of our civil servants, because like the job that Dan has, I mean, it's not enough time to actually talk about like how hard his job is. And I'm in awe every day of these people that I work with and how they get things done for us, So it's just, I love that you're highlighting local government CIOs. Thank you for that.
And I think, now that we're running out of time, I think you just gave us a topic for a future episode. So I always appreciate that. So as we wrap up today, it's clear that the role of the municipal CIO is more crucial than ever in navigating the complexities of digital transformation at the city level. Dan Ault's work in Cary, North Carolina, exemplifies how technology can be harnessed to not only improve services, but to fundamentally reshape the way cities operate and interact with their residents. I want to thank Dan Ault for sharing his valuable insights and expertise, and I'm so grateful to my dear friend and co-host Denise Collison for joining me today. We hope this episode has inspired you to think about the potential of technology in your own community and the pivotal role CIOs play in driving that change. Until next time, keep innovating.